everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today I am joined by Nachman Schachter, author of a brand new ArtScroll book, 10 Steps to Eternity on the 10 nisyonos. Thank you, Reb Nachman, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Yitzchak, for inviting me, and I very much appreciate you inviting me and ArtScroll publishing my sefer, my book.
It is a book, it is a sefer.
It is a book, it is a sefer.
Kind of a combination of both. Before
Yes,
we
it
get
is.
into the book, tell us a little about yourself. I know you live in Baltimore today. Where do you come from? What's your background?
Well, I grew up in Borough Park. Then I went to yeshiva in Borough Park, high school in the Mir Yeshiva, Beis Midrash, went from Long Beach to Lakewood, and then I learned near Israel, where when I got married in 1980, we moved to Israel. Was
there
Baltimore.
anyone over the course of your yeshiva years, anyone who impacted you more profoundly than others? Anyone who was a seminal figure?
So of course, we all have our elementary rebbeim who are wonderful, and high school are wonderful. But when I went to Long Beach to the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Yitzchak Fegelstock, Tzadik Levracha, I was there the second year of the yeshiva. We had 20 Baruchim there, so I had a personal contact with the Rosh Yeshiva, and he helped each of us grow in our own way. I had a close relationship with him. It was very beautiful. Moving to Lakewood, when I came to Lakewood still only had one building, the Yoshan. Rav Shneur Cutler, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, was the Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Nosson Wachvogel was the Mashkiach, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And Rav Nosson Wachvogel, he certainly made a very important impression on me. When we first came, I came with my group. I think we had like 10 of us that came from Long Beach. And my chavrusa and I said, you know what, wouldn't it be nice to be a chavrusa with the mashkiach? So we went over to the mashkiach, we went through the lobby, went to the mashkiach. We're about to knock on the door when we looked over and said, he's not going to learn with us. Turned around and walked out. But on the way out, I said to myself, why wouldn't he learn with me? So I went back, knocked on the door. He opened the door, and I said, can I learn with the mashkiach? With a big smile on his face, he said, whoever asks to learn with me, I will learn with them.
Wow.
It started out once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month. And before you knew it, in those days, he lived in the dormitory Monday to Thursday, and he would sleep there. So he had someone who woke him up in the morning, took him to the mikveh, and then we learned. So after a few years, I was that person, and we learned everything from Chumash to Mishnayos, Gemara, Shulchan, everything.
Wow, it's a big schos. We're talking about what now, the late 1970s or so?
Yeah, late 1970s, right. So that was very beautiful. And then, when I moved to Lakewood, so I went to shul in the Aguda of Baltimore.
When you moved to Baltimore?
When I moved to Baltimore. And
that's what, and what year was that?
1980.
Okay.
Got married December 1980, and the last Sheva Brachas, Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And Rav Heinemann is the Rav there, and he is the rabbinical individual who runs the Star K. Right. So I became close with him for certain reasons, and he has been a very important figure in my life for the last many, many years.
Now, what have you done professionally over the last 40 years? Once you left Kailul, or once you got married, what did you do?
Well, I've done a few things, but in the last 25, 30 years, I have two jobs that I do. One is I have a cleaning company. I clean buildings, schools, shuls, office buildings. I have crews that go out and clean. And my second job, Rav Heinemann, started in 1980 a security organization. He and some others started a security organization. There was a security issue in Baltimore, and someone ran it till 2000. He asked me to take over after 2000. And that's how I became close with him also, because many questions that would happen as far as security, I would ask him. So it's been a very beautiful relationship for many years.
So writing is not your professional career, and yet you have written other books over the years, and now you've written a brand new ArtScroll book. How did you get into that field of writing? When did you know that you have that talent and ability?
So I never knew that I had the talent, and I'm only having the talent because you're telling me I have the talent. But actually, you're asking for the story behind the story, I guess. What is, you, Rabbi Hissinger, you work here, and you work in a very exciting place, and you're involved in Torah questions and seferim being written and authors. Every day you have a very exciting life, and I assume most people here have that kind of exciting life. But most of us who work in janitorial or other business, IT, we struggle sometimes to get into the excitement of life when we're involved in what we're doing. So many years ago, I tried to create that excitement. I enjoy halacha. I like learning. I've always learned halacha. And there was one particular part of halacha which I felt needed my help, that if there's some kind of on Shabbos, if there's a kuach nefesh involved, someone is struggling for something, people around, standing around, look at each other like, do we call on the phone? Do we drive them to the hospital? People are never sure, because B'chal Shabbos, chas v'sholom, I'm not going to be the one B'chal Shabbos. So I felt that was one area I would start seeing myself grow and getting excitement in. So I started to write about Pikuach Nefesh. There are different categories, and I put together a pamphlet with Rev Heinemann. I asked him to help me. He was excited to help me. And I put together a pamphlet, and everybody loved it. Subsequently, I put together 20 other pieces, muktzah, electricity on Shabbos, and other things not to do with Shabbos. Ended up putting out a sefer, 15 years later, Guide to Halachas. So I accomplished, Baruch Hashem, what I set out to. I was excited in what I was doing, had nothing to do with my work, but my side thing, that's how I was enjoying it.
Beautiful.
I was enjoying, and in fact, when I was coming to New York, when I was coming here yesterday, I got a phone call. Someone's in the hospital reading my sefer, and he said a certain thing, but it doesn't seem to make sense, and it makes sense. I said, you know something? That's technology. Technology has changed in 15 years. You're right. It does not apply anymore. So that's the kind of thing. I am very fortunate that I was able to get into that niche of doing things that I like. So now getting to this.
You were writing more on halacha, but now you've kind of changed course into, what would you call this new book? Is it more hashkafa, more chizuk? How would you qualify it?
It's definitely hashkafa. So when I finished that sefer a few months later, I said, okay, let me try something in hashkafa that I can again invigorate, excite myself with. I didn't know the topic that I was looking for. Rabbi David Asher had just come out with Living Emunah many years ago. He had a few svarim, and then he came to Baltimore to speak, and it was very exciting. I enjoyed what he said on Emunah, and the Chavas Halvava says you have menuchas hanefesh. If you're a Baal Emunah, you have menuchas hanefesh. Rabbi Yitzchak, menuchas hanefesh, that's not a bad thing to get. Not a bad thing. So I said, okay, let me try Emunah, but then what's the venue? Am I learning Chavas Halvavas? The first time in the Torah that it says anything about Emunah, V'hemin b'Hashem, v'achshvel l'tzedakah, Avraham Avinu. Hashem says witness, says edus on Avraham, he had Emunah. Avraham's going to be the person. And little by little, Hashem got me into the tests, the nisyonos. So I started to learning it. Now, when I started learning it, you have to understand, I never expected 5 years later to be sitting here in ArtScroll to be talking to you about that sefer. I was learning it for myself. No other reason. Just learning it.
Now, when you say you were learning it, did you have a regimen? Were you just learning Chumash Rashi? Were you learning the Mefarshei HaMikra? What was your approach to learning about the 10 nisyonos?
Okay, so that's a very good question. You can learn it on so many different levels. Of course, Chumash and Rashi, but the Midrashim, the backbone is the Midrash Rabbah, Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, Yalkut Shimoni, all the basic Midrashim on the subject, and some of the Rishonim, the Rebbeinu B'chaya, the Ramban, and I wove them together to create this sefer and this narrative. That's what it is. And after about 5 tests, I realized that this work is so fundamental and it's so enjoyable that I think I need to start writing it up and let me see where it goes.
So initially you weren't writing, you were learning it.
Just learning it.
Lishma. And then a few years later you started putting your thoughts into writing.
Right.
And what was the format that you decided you were going to use as you were writing? What was the approach?
So the approach was I used the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, who has each nisayon, but he also explains what the nisayon was, not just the background explaining how it happened, but he says Avraham Avinu in the first nisayon, he had greater emunah. And the second nisayon, he explains what they are. So I used him as the background, but I used all the other midrashim to weave in their side of what they felt happened, what did Avraham say, what did Sarah say, so that they complemented each other. That was the basis of it. The midrashim of the basis, adding in rishonim that will clarify when necessary.
Now you say it's fundamental, learning about the 10 nisyonos. Why is that, and how would that apply practically to anyone watching this conversation? And in mitzvah, they'll go and buy the book. How does it apply practically to their life? Day to day, people are going through all different types of their own nisyonos, very different than Avraham Avinu's 10 nisyonos. How would you say that translates?
So, of course, these are all very good questions. And Avraham Avinu was the greatest of the great. How do we fit in Avraham Avinu's life? But the fact is, we're all going to go through nisyonos, every one of us. Avraham went through more difficult nisyonos, but we're all going through, on our levels, nisyonos. There is no difference between my nisyon on my lower level than someone else's. So, it is so important to know that God cares about us. And it's so important to know that what He's doing for us is really for our best. And if we learn about Avraham Avinu, he was the happiest person in the world. You would never know that he was told to shech his son. If you read, you don't read this from the Psukim. The Psukim don't tell us much of the background. Avraham, they go through the raw steps of he did this, he did that, he did this, and he did that. But we don't see the simcha. We don't see the enjoyment. We don't see the Hashem, I love you no matter what you tell me. That we don't see from the Psukim. And that's why the Midrashim and Mishonim are so important to learn about, so we see really what he was feeling and really how it applies to us. From Lech Lecha and Vayera, you don't see how it applies to us. Avram came here, he went Lech Lecha, and then he had a Milah, and then he changed his name. Okay, what does it have to do with Nachman Schachter? But when you start reading that when he had his test with Sarah being taken by Paro, and he's crying to Hashem, well, I'm also crying to Hashem, maybe not the same way, but I have a test that I'm about to approach, this difficult thing that I know is going to happen to me today, and what should I say, what should I do? I may not have the same words as Avraham Avinu, but I'm going to daven to Hashem. And by seeing it continually, each nisayon at every different time, how his words and how he speaks to Hashem, that applies to me. It applies very much to me.
Did you find that certain specific nisyonos of Avraham Avinu could provide very specific chizuk to certain contemporary nisyonos? Was there any parallel that you found?
That's a difficult thing for me to say. I'm not really sure. Not really sure. It's Emunah, of course, and just, if you go through each of them, he has troubles with, let's say, Yishmael. Right. Yishmael is asked to be sent away. That sort of applies today also, how we have children sometimes that we may have to send away. So there is information there, and this feeling of how Avram dealt with it. So yes, there's a lot to cull from what he did. You have to sit down and look. Asking on one foot, it needs to be looked at, but there is plenty there that applies today.
Going through these 10 nisyonos, and especially delving into the Midrashim as you did, was there one or two revelations? Was there an epiphany that you had, that you saw something that maybe you had never seen before, that totally reframed the way you looked at this, we'll call it a sugya, this sugya of the 10 nisyonos?
So, as you just said, this is a sugya, but it's a tremendous, Lech Lecha Vayera is a tremendous sugya for Klal Yisrael. And whoever will read my book, and I say my book, but it's really the Torah. If I would have written a fiction book with names and plots, it's my book. It's not my book. These are there is practically nothing in there of Nachman Schachter. One or two small things that Rav Heinemann said I could write, I wrote. Otherwise, Nachman Schachter doesn't put his opinion anywhere. That's what's very unique about this. This is all Midrashim, all Rishonim, some Achronim, Mechtavei Elio, a few, but mostly Rishonim. So it's not really my work. It's the Torah. So it's all in there, and whoever's going to read it will react to it, will feel whatever applies to them. So what I say applies to me, someone else is for sure going to say, well, look at that, and I see this applies to me. But as far as what's an epiphany, I would think that something that I mentioned before, that when you see Lech Lecha Vayera, you don't really see that Avram is talking to Hashem. He talks to Hashem in Lech Lecha, and in the Akedah Hashem speaks to him, and a little bit in by the seventh test by Hachanas Azarchim. But one thing you see from the Drashim is all day, Avraham Avinu is talking to Hashem in whatever it is. Every step he takes. We say in by a tinus, at the end of the Slichas, we say, Misha Ana Avraham Avinu B'Hamariya, Hu Ya'anenu. Where did he call out to Hashem? You look in the pasuk, look in the psukim. It doesn't say anywhere he was asking for anything. Hashem told him, bring it, brought it up. Doesn't say anything. But if you read the Midrashim, he's talking to Hashem from the time he left. He's asking Hashem every day. This, what can I do here? Speaking out Yitzchak, this happened. Whatever it was, he's talking to Hashem the whole way, because he was in commune with Hashem the whole time. So that to me is something that really made an impression. Like we used to hear the Pashat Emunah, the mamas lived in Europe. They woke up in the morning and said, Hashem, please put food on my table. Please help my children. Did they go to Beis Yaakov? Did they go to Soroshnir? No. They had the Pashat Emunah because they spoke to Hashem. Reading the Midrashim brings you back that to talk to Hashem, to Hashem.
That's a great takeaway. If there's something people could learn from this, is that there is that need to talk to the Rebbeinu Shalom like a father, because he is one.
Yes.
And I think you would agree, and I could say from sitting in this chair and the conversations we've had in this room, so many books on Emunah and B'tachon have come out, and there seems to be such a tremendous thirst out there, especially today, maybe more than ever, for Chizuk and Emunah and B'tachon. And what you've done here with this sefer, this book, is you've gone really back to the very first person. You've gone to the source, so to speak. The first person to recognize the Rebbeinu Shalom on his own, and the first person to speak to the Rebbeinu Shalom in that way, and someone who went through tremendous challenges and came out on the other side, so to speak, with flying colors. So
let me just clarify.
Yeah.
Adam Harishon recognized Hashem.
Right.
Chanoch, others, Noach recognized.
Right.
So we can't take away from them. I understand. Because there are those going to say, well, what about them?
Right.
So we're not to take away. But Avraham Avinu was in his own league. Avraham Avinu, Klal Yisrael came from Avram, not from the others. They were great people. They're in Gan Eden. But Avraham Avinu started Klal Yisrael. He was in a whole different league of knowing Hashem. He's the first one who Hashem said, I am. Avram said, okay, I'll walk through fire for you. No one else till then walked through fire for Hashem. It was a whole different hakara of what Avraham Avinu knew and thought, and that's where we come from Avram, because it's a whole different level.
Wow. As we wrap up, any final thoughts that you want to share about this book specifically?
I hope that people will buy it. And this was written, the narrative was written for simple people who want to read it as a book. I have a novel. I'll take this novel. I'll try the 10 tests to eternity. It can be written as a novel. It can be read as a novel. It can be read as someone who wants to internalize some of the limudim, some of what's written in the book. It's also written for the Talmudic scholar. The Talmudic scholar shouldn't say, I know too much. You do know too much, but there's more than a narrative. I wrote the book with insights. Insights are, the Malachim come to Avraham Avinu. Did Avraham know that they were Malachim or that they were human beings? Okay, it's a question. It's machlokes. Well, if they were Malachim, why are you feeding them food? And how could we learn chesed from Malachim? That's a question. Insights answer that. It says that the calf, the animal that Avram took it was created Erev Shabbos. Well, why'd it have to be created Erev Shabbos? What's the difference? Maral answers that. It's in an insight, meaning this is something, extra credit. You don't have to read it. It's going to be on the bottom. But if you want to learn the sefer, read the sefer, you will find, even if you're a Talmud Chacham, you'll find things that probably you haven't read before.
Well, I think that's an important point that you brought up, that the book, from going through the manuscript, I noticed that it is very much approachable. You know, some people might think a book, Ten Nisyonos, Avraham Avinu, that's going to be way above my league and, above my pay grade. Maybe I should try something else. But you put it down in very, very contemporary terms, with relatable analogies, and really doing it in a way that any person, man, woman, child, no matter what their station in life, could really glean tremendous chizuk and direction from it. And I'm sure that's going to be the feedback that you'll hear, Mitzvah Hashem, as the book gets out there and as you spread that message of Amunah, Mitzvah Hashem.
May I say one more thing?
Of course.
You have close to 100 stories, contemporary stories, never heard before. I was very fortunate. Again, I'm not a writer, and I'm not a story person. Baruch Hashem, it came. Stories that people, relating to Avraham is one thing, but relating to your fellow friend who lives in your city around, because I have the names of the people who it happened to in the book.
Real names.
Real names.
Yeah.
So it really happened. And people can relate to that in a different way. We have stories from those who left Iran. 2 long stories. One that left in the hot desert of 120 degrees, and the other one that left in the middle of the winter with 6 feet of snow, walking through rivers, literally freezing rivers with your clothes on the head. There's a lot of interesting stories, stories that people will find that they can learn from a lot.
Well, Kol Kavod, thank you for taking the time to write the book. Thank you for sharing it with Klal Yisrael, and Amir Tashem, people will gain tremendously from it. Thank you, Reb Nachman, for coming in.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.